After 5 years deployed overseas, I was finally driving home to suburban Chicago. Then my stomach dropped. I slammed the brakes. Coffee splashed everywhere. The quarter-acre lot I'd bought for my dream workshop was gone. In its place, a brand-new gated parking lot with fresh asphalt, electronic gates, and signs screaming, Willowbrook HOA Premium Parking, $75 month. 60 luxury cars packed in, earning someone thousands monthly on my land. I walked into the office trailer where HOA President Stephanie Blackwood barely looked up from counting cash. When I showed her my deed, she laughed.
Sweetie, this is community property. Take it up with our lawyers.
This trust fund princess was dismissing a returning veteran while profiting off stolen property. If you've ever dealt with an HOA like this, drop your city in the comments. Because what I did next, my engineering background and one remote-controlled valve, completely flipped the script. You won't believe how spectacular her downfall was. My name's Danny Kowalski, and this is exactly what happened to me. Back in 2018, I was running a successful plumbing business here in suburban Chicago, specializing in commercial hydraulics. Life was good, divorced but on decent terms with my ex-wife Sarah, 2 teenage boys who actually still wanted to hang out with their old man, and I'd just purchased this beautiful quarter-acre lot on Maple Street for $38 grand. The plan was simple. Build the workshop of my dreams. I'm talking about a proper man cave with hydraulic lifts, a full welding setup, space for the boys to learn real skills instead of staring at screens all day. Jake was 17, Tommy was 15, and they were actually excited about the project. We spent weekends walking the property, measuring out where everything would go. Then opportunity knocked. A military contractor offered me a 5-year position overseeing water treatment facilities in Eastern Europe. The money was incredible. Triple my normal rate, all expenses paid, enough to build that workshop properly when I got back. Sarah and I talked it through. The boys could stay with her, I'd video call twice a week, send money for their college funds. It seemed perfect. I remember that last morning in October 2019, standing on my empty lot with a cup of coffee that tasted like cardboard, visualizing the workshop one more time before I left. The ground was already getting hard with the first frost, that sharp, clean smell that means winter's coming. I had 5 years to plan every detail. Overseas, I threw myself into the work, installing massive pumping stations, coordinating with local engineers who spoke 3 languages, but somehow we always understood each other when pipes were involved. Every few months, I'd pull up Google Earth and look at my lot, still empty, still waiting. The boys would text me pictures sometimes. Dad's future workshop looking lonely with some joke about weeds getting taller. The separation was harder than expected. Sarah started dating someone new in year 3, a banker named Greg who apparently knew nothing about tools but could discuss mortgage rates for hours. The boys grew distant. Video calls became monthly check-ins, then holiday greetings. I told myself it was temporary. 5 years and I'd be home to make up for lost time. Meanwhile, I had no idea what was happening back in Willowbrook Estates. See, our HOA was run by this trust fund princess named Stephanie Blackwood. Real piece of work. 38 years old, never held a real job, inherited her board position when her daddy moved to Florida. Stephanie drove a pristine white Lexus that she detailed twice a week and treated working-class folks like we were there for her entertainment. While I was installing pumps in Romania, Stephanie was looking at my empty lot and seeing dollar signs. In her mind, property sitting unused was property being wasted. She convinced the board that my lot was abandoned and that the community would benefit from improvements. Of course, she conveniently forgot to mention that someone actually owned that land. By 2021, Stephanie had convinced enough residents that a parking lot was desperately needed. People were tired of street parking, tired of walking 3 blocks from overflow areas. She pushed through a vote, hired her friend's construction company, and built 60 premium parking spaces complete with electronic gates and monthly billing. The smell of fresh asphalt, the sound of hydraulic gate motors, the steady ping of cars backing up, my empty lot had become a proper business operation. Stephanie was collecting $75 a month per space, pulling in over $4,000 monthly from my land. But here's the thing about women like Stephanie. They're so used to getting their way, they never bother checking if what they're doing is actually legal. 5 years later, I'm finally coming home, expecting to see weeds and maybe some kids' bike tracks. Instead, I'm staring at Stephanie's little empire, built entirely on property she never owned. The first thing I did was sit in my rental car for about 10 minutes, just staring. You know that feeling when reality doesn't match what your brain expects? Like when you walk into your childhood bedroom and your parents turned it into an office. Except this was worse because this was my land, my money, my dreams, sitting under about 4 inches of asphalt. I finally got out and walked around the perimeter. The parking lot was busy. Luxury cars everywhere. BMW sedans, a couple of Mercedes SUVs, even a Tesla that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. These weren't people who needed affordable parking. These were people who paid for convenience. There was a small office trailer at the entrance with a sign. Willowbrook Premium Parking. Stephanie Blackwood, Community Development Manager. Through the window, I could see Stephanie herself, leaning back in a chair with her feet up, scrolling through her phone. She looked exactly the same. That soft, privileged face that had never seen a day of real work. Designer nails clicking against her phone case. I knocked on the trailer door. Stephanie looked up, annoyed at being interrupted from whatever important business she was conducting on Instagram. "Help you?" she said, not getting up, that fake sweet voice that meant trouble. "Yeah, I'm Danny Kowalski. I own the land this parking lot is built on." Stephanie actually laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A genuine, dismissive chuckle like I'd told her I was the King of England. "Sweetie, this is HOA property. Has been for years. We improved abandoned land that was becoming an eyesore." She gestured around like she was showing off the Sistine Chapel. "Community voted on it. Everything's legal and proper." I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture of my deed. "This says otherwise." That's when Stephanie's demeanor changed. She stood up, crossed her arms, and looked at me like I was something stuck to her designer shoe. "Listen, honey, I don't know what game you're playing, but this parking facility serves 200 families in this community. If you've got some claim to make, you can take it up with our lawyers." "I'm not making a claim," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm stating a fact. This is my property and you built on it without permission." Stephanie walked past me and opened the trailer door, her perfume hitting me like a chemical weapon. "I think we're done here. This is private property now, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a pipe wrench. Over the next few days, I tried the reasonable approach. I called the HOA office, left messages explaining the situation. I even went to a board meeting thinking maybe this was all a misunderstanding that could be worked out between adults. Stephanie had used those few days well. When I walked into the community center conference room, I was facing 5 board members who looked at me like I was there to steal their Christmas presents. Stephanie had positioned herself at the head of the table, a stack of papers in front of her, wearing a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mr. Kowalski," she said with that fake friendly tone that means someone's about to screw you over, "we've reviewed your concerns about the parking facility. Our legal counsel has confirmed that the property in question was improved under adverse possession statutes after being abandoned for over 3 years. She slid a document across the table with those manicured nails. "These are the papers establishing HOA ownership. Everything's been filed properly with the county." I looked at the documents. They were impressive. Official letterhead, legal language, stamps, and signatures. They were also complete fabrications. The adverse possession claim cited statutes that didn't exist, and the signatures looked like they'd been practiced in someone's garage. But here's what I learned during my time overseas. When you're dealing with corrupt officials, you don't win by getting angry. You win by being smarter and more patient than they are. So I smiled, nodded, and said, "I'll have my attorney review these." Stephanie's smug grin told me everything I needed to know. She thought she'd won. She thought some blue-collar plumber who'd been out of the country for 5 years couldn't possibly challenge her little empire. That night, I called my old surveyor buddy Jim Rodriguez. "Jim, I need you to do me a favor and pull the original property lines for my lot on Maple Street. Yeah, the one with the parking lot on it. And Jim, make sure you're precise, down to the inch." The next morning, Jim called back with news that made my day. "Danny, you're not going to believe this. That parking lot extends 15 feet onto Stephanie's own property. Her precious rose garden, it's sitting on the public easement." Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Armed with Jim's survey results, I decided it was time to have another conversation with Stephanie. But this time, I brought documentation. I found her at the parking lot office the next Tuesday morning, wearing a designer blouse that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She was on the phone, laughing about something involving a spa weekend and mimosas. The kind of conversation that reminded you some people have never worried about making rent. When she saw me approaching, she quickly ended the call and put on her serious business face. "Mr. Kowalski, I thought we settled this matter." "We did," I said, spreading Jim's survey map on her desk. "Turns out your parking lot extends 15 feet past my property line. You built on your own land, too." Stephanie glanced at the map like it was written in ancient Egyptian, her perfectly contoured eyebrows furrowing. "I don't know what this is supposed to prove." "It proves you don't actually know where property lines are." I pointed to the section where her parking spaces overlapped her backyard. "See this area here? That's where you tore up your rose garden to build spaces 47 through 52. Except according to county records, that's actually public easement. You can't build permanent structures on easement land." For the first time since I'd met her, Stephanie looked genuinely uncomfortable, her confidence cracking like cheap nail polish. That's impossible. Our contractor checked everything." "Your contractor checked whatever you told him to check." I folded up the survey. "But here's the thing, Stephanie. I'm not here to cause problems for the community. I just want to work something out that's fair for everyone." That was my mistake, trying to be reasonable with someone who viewed reasonableness as weakness. 3 days later, I was working under the kitchen sink at my temporary apartment when there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers stood on my porch, looking official and slightly bored. "Daniel Kowalski?" the older officer asked. "That's me." "We have a restraining order here. You're not allowed within 50 feet of 847 Maple Street or the Willowbrook Premium Parking Facility." I stared at the papers. Stephanie had filed an emergency protective order claiming I was harassing residents and threatening community safety. According to her sworn statement, I had aggressively confronted her multiple times and made veiled threats about property destruction. "Officer," I said carefully, "that parking lot is built on my land. I have the deed and survey to prove it." The younger officer shrugged. "That's a civil matter, sir. This is a criminal matter. Stay away from the property until you work it out in court." After they left, I sat on my couch staring at the restraining order. Stephanie had played this perfectly. Now I couldn't even set foot on my own property without risking arrest. I was effectively locked out of my own land by a piece of paper full of lies. But Stephanie had made one crucial mistake. While I was overseas, I'd learned to deal with bureaucrats who thought paperwork was more important than facts. The secret is understanding that every system has rules, and if you know the rules better than the people trying to bend them, you can turn their own game against them. I spent the next 2 days at the county recorder's office, pulling every document related to my property going back to 1965. Property deeds, utility easements, construction permits, tax records, everything. What I found was fascinating. The original utility easement for my property was granted in 1967 to Commonwealth Electric for a main power line running from Maple Street to the transformer station. That easement gave them the right to access a 10-foot corridor along the southern edge of my lot for maintenance and repairs. But here's the interesting part. Stephanie's parking lot had been built directly over that easement, not just touching it, completely blocking it. And according to the utility company's own records, they'd been paying Stephanie's HOA $1,500 a month for alternate access routes because they couldn't reach their equipment through the original easement. I called Commonwealth Electric and spoke with their facilities manager, a woman named Carol, who sounded like she'd been dealing with utility access issues since before electricity was invented. "Mr. Kowalski, we've been trying to get proper access restored for 3 years, she said. "The HOA keeps promising to provide a solution, but they keep cashing our checks and giving us the runaround." "What would happen if you needed emergency access to that transformer?" I asked. "Well, we'd have to shut down power to about 400 homes until we could bring in emergency equipment. But honestly, if someone's blocking a utility easement without authorization, that's a violation of state code. We could file a complaint with the Public Utilities Commission." And I smiled for the first time in days. "Carol, I think I can help you with that access problem." Stephanie thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize I'd been studying the board for a lot longer than she had. While I was building my case with utility records, Stephanie was busy consolidating her position. She called an emergency HOA meeting for the following Thursday, 7 p.m. sharp at the community center. The agenda had one item: addressing threats to community safety and property values. I couldn't attend, of course, thanks to her restraining order, but my neighbor, Mrs. Vanessa, an 80-year-old retired teacher who'd lived in Willowbrook since the houses were built, filled me in afterward. She knocked on my door around 9:30 with a plate of homemade cookies and a look that could have melted steel. "Danny, that girl's got some nerve," she said, settling into my kitchen chair with the authority of someone who'd outlived 3 HOA presidents. "She stood up there and told everyone you were some kind of dangerous criminal trying to steal community property." According to Mrs. Vanessa, Stephanie had really put on a show. She brought charts, photographs, even testimonials from residents about how much they loved the convenient parking. Then came the big finale, a motion to assess every household $3,000 for a legal defense fund to fight my hostile takeover attempt. $3,000, Mrs. Vanessa repeated, shaking her head. For people like the Hendersons who live on Social Security, that might as well be $30,000. Poor Helen Henderson started crying right there in the meeting. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been so focused on Stephanie's corruption that I hadn't considered how her games would hurt innocent people. Elderly folks on fixed incomes, young families already stretched thin by inflation, they'd all be paying for Stephanie's legal bills to defend something she'd built illegally in the first place. But Mrs. Vanessa wasn't finished. "Here's the thing that really gets me, Danny. That girl had the gall to say the parking money goes to community improvements. You know what improvements we've seen? Her fancy new Lexus and a lot of bills for administrative expenses. Meanwhile, the playground equipment's falling apart and the community pool's been temporarily closed for 2 years." After she left, I sat up most of the night thinking. Stephanie wasn't just stealing my land, she was stealing from every resident who believed their parking fees were helping the community. This wasn't about property rights anymore. This was about a con woman taking advantage of good people. The next morning I drove to the edge of Willowbrook, carefully staying 51 feet from the parking lot, and started knocking on doors. Not to complain about Stephanie, but to offer something she'd never provided, actual service to the community. "Hi, I'm Danny Kowalski," I'd say. "I'm a master plumber, and I heard some folks in the neighborhood might need help with winter pipe maintenance. No charge, just a neighbor helping neighbors." Word spread fast. Mrs. Henderson needed her water heater looked at. The Garcias had a persistent drip in their basement. Young couple on Oak Street was worried about frozen pipes in their new baby's room. I spent 3 days crawling under houses, adjusting water pressure, and explaining how to prevent costly repairs. Here's what I learned. People were frustrated with Stephanie's management, but they felt powerless to change anything. She controlled the board meetings, the financials, the communication channels. Most residents had no idea where their parking money actually went or how HOA decisions were really made. But here's what Stephanie didn't understand about working-class communities. We take care of each other. Every house I fixed became an ally. Every neighbor who watched me work for free began to question why Stephanie charged for everything but delivered nothing. The breakthrough came on Sunday afternoon. I was helping Mr. Peterson replace a corroded shutoff valve when he mentioned something that made me stop what I was doing. "You know, Danny, it's funny," he said, holding my flashlight steady while I tightened connections. "Stephanie keeps talking about how that parking lot serves the community, but half the spaces sit empty most days. And my electric bill's been sky high ever since they built it. Something about increased grid usage in our area." I looked up from the pipe fitting. "Pete, what did you say about the electric bill?" "Commonwealth Electric added a surcharge 2 years ago. Said there was increased demand from commercial operations in our neighborhood." Pete shrugged. "I figured it was from all those new shops over on Main Street." That night, I called Carol at Commonwealth Electric again. "Carol, I need to ask you about electrical usage at the Willowbrook parking lot." "Oh, that's a whole separate issue," she said. "They're pulling commercial-level power for those gate motors and security lights, but they're still classified as residential. Technically, that's a code violation, but we've been too busy fighting for easement access to pursue it." Stephanie's house of cards was starting to show some serious cracks. Everything changed the following Tuesday when I got a call from Carol at Commonwealth Electric. Her voice had that excited edge that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. And it wasn't going to be me. "Danny, you need to get down to the county planning office right now. Ask for Mike Brennan in code enforcement. Tell him Carol from Commonwealth sent you about the Willowbrook utility violation." Mike Brennan turned out to be a guy who looked like he'd been enforcing building codes since before Stephanie was born. Gray mustache, permanent squint from reading blueprints, and the kind of patience that comes from dealing with 30 years of developers who think rules don't apply to them. "So, you're the property owner," he said, spreading out a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "We've been building quite a file on your parking lot situation." What I learned in that cramped government office changed everything. Stephanie hadn't just built on my